After 5 years of isolation, a mountain man discovered the amazing truth about a widowed woman. The chill of late autumn swept through the Appalachian mountains as Jake maneuvered quietly through the dense thickets, the cold air biting at his rugged skin. His heart remained entombed in grief, an emotional fortress erected in the wake of loss. 5 years since the night the world felt like it fractured, leaving him alone. His family, his purpose, they had been snatched away in a cruel twist of fate. And now, seclusion was his only companion. Today was no different, except something drew him deeper into the woods. Curiosity? Or something more dangerous? His world was one of solitude and self-reliance, a fortress against the hurt of connection, but she was becoming an undeniable presence. The nights grew colder, darkness closing in like a blanket, and Jake's body trembled from more than just the freezing air. Memories of his family, his once vibrant home filled with love, encroached upon him. Colliding with Mary's resolve to preserve her own familial legacy became a source of torment. Her struggles echoed his own fears. Would she always cling to the past, or could she see a future unclouded by grief? In that tension, the possibility of something more loomed just out of reach, creating a delicious agony of longing. As the chill of winter seeped into every crevice, doubt gnawed at Jake. He felt himself weakening, drawn into her orbit despite his intentions to remain detached. Inside that hidden cabin lay something more than just wood and nails. It held stories, warmth, and a flicker of hope that tantalized him. But with every moment spent sharing silent glances and terse conversations, the fear of loss clawed at him. What if letting her in meant inviting pain back into his life? Winds howled outside, pushing against the cabin walls as Jake found himself at a precipice. Torn between the fear of emotional entanglement and a growing desire for connection, his resolve battled against emerging feelings. Was this an awakening, or simply the final unraveling of a man once fiercely dedicated to isolation? The storm raged outside, but the storm within him felt far more perilous, each pulse of anxiety reminding him that to step forward into the abyss meant confronting the shadows lurking within. As the howling wind enveloped the cabin like a relentless beast, Jake stood at the threshold, caught between the haunting fear of connection and the desperate need for warmth. He hesitated, the weight of his past pressing against his chest like an anchor. Was it time to lower his defenses, to peel back the layers of solitude and stand vulnerable in the presence of another? Mary's eyes bore into him, a mix of challenge and invitation swirling within their depths. She sensed his turmoil, her own grief echoing back at him. There was a bond forming, an invisible threat that both terrified and intrigued him. In this moment, he could either flee back into the safety of isolation or choose to confront the emotional tempest brewing inside him. "Aren't you cold out there?" she finally asked, her voice slicing through the wind like a lifeline. He looked down at his weathered hands, rough from years of labor, but trembling slightly as they clenched. "I don't know why I'm out here," he admitted, the words slipping from his lips before he could trap them. "I'm not looking for company." Mary stepped closer, her shadows mingling with him in the dim light. "Nobody truly wants to be alone, Jake. It takes strength to face the past." Her straightforwardness shook him.
He hadn't prepared for this conversation. He had come looking for refuge from his memories, not a confrontation with them. "What do you know about strength?" he snapped, defensive instinct flaring as he felt the walls around him tremble. "I know about survival," she replied evenly, the steel in her voice cutting through his anger. "I also know that holding on to sorrow can be suffocating. It's a choice, just as solitude is a choice. But healing needs more than just time. It needs connection." The bitter taste of her words clung to him. There was truth in them that felt like a dagger, sharp yet liberating. He watched how she carried herself, her posture reflecting an unyielding spirit forged in the fires of loss. In that moment, admiration flickered alongside skepticism in his heart. What would it mean for him to alter the course of his life? Could he truly allow himself to venture into the unknown territory of companionship after 5 years of isolation driven by torment? "I'll help you," Jake heard himself say, the impulse sudden and undeniable. "If you need anything around here, just ask." Surprise crossed Mary's features, followed by a slow smile, one that held the promise of possibilities. Then let's start by gathering wood for the stove, shall we? As they moved into the biting cold, an unexpected camaraderie blossomed between them. They worked side by side, the tension easing slightly with each shared glance. For the first time in years, Jake felt the tendrils of purpose weaving through his days again, as if the very act of helping was reviving long-dead parts of his spirit. Each log they piled became a testament to a potential future where he could relinquish some of his isolation. Yet with this possibility came an undercurrent of fear. What if opening up only led to heartbreak anew? As twilight descended, casting shadows over the clearing, Jake couldn't shake the gnawing uncertainty. The golden hue seeping from the cabin's windows felt welcoming, yet it also intensified the hollowness of his memories. The risk he took today had opened a door, but as the sun dipped below the horizon, his old fears clawed back, whispering that the warmth he sought might only be a fleeting illusion, a mere flicker before another frost. And with the chilling darkness settling around them, he realized he was standing at a crossroads once again. It was a choice between retreating back into the familiarity of pain or embracing an unsettling yet exhilarating possibility. The winds howled outside, but even they couldn't mask the echo of his own thoughts. What would happen if he fell again? With that question reverberating in his mind, Jake looked over at Mary, a woman who, despite her own scars, was offering him warmth. Could he unravel the very fabric of solitude he had woven for himself, or would stepping into this closeness spell his undoing?
The stakes were rising, and as he watched her, a new determination sparked within him, one that just might lead to a confrontation with his deepest fears. But as he stepped closer, another shadow loomed, and he questioned if the greatest threat was the ghosts of his past or the tumultuous but thrilling unknown ahead. Jake bent over the logs, focusing on the sound of the splitting wood, hoping to drown out the growing noise in his mind. Each crack felt like a symbolic fracture of the walls he had built around himself, weakening them inch by inch. With Mary working beside him, he felt an odd mixture of anger and relief. Anger at himself for allowing her to penetrate his defenses, and relief in realizing that he wasn't alone anymore. The isolation he had grown accustomed to now felt foreign, almost suffocating in the light of her presence. "How did you end up here?" Mary asked as she stacked the last of the wood. He sensed her gaze probing gently, seeking to understand not just his physical circumstances, but the emotional landscape that lay beneath them. He hesitated, glancing down at his hands, once rugged but now showing signs of hesitance. The stories of regret and loss echoed in his mind like shadows. "I thought being here would help me forget everything," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. In sharing this, he felt a slight trembling in the air, as if the weight of his truth would pull them both into darker depths. "And has it?" she pressed, her voice steady, yet imbued with an undeniable empathy. Jake's heart raced. What right did she have to unlock this door? The memory scratched at the surface like claws, threatening to rip apart the fragile attention he had granted to their newfound connection. He felt cornered, caught between wanting to remain distant and the urge to release the suffocating bitterness that had held him hostage. Some days, maybe. Others, not so much. Mary's nod of understanding ignited something within him, a flicker of possibility. She took a step closer, standing amid the fading light, and an unspoken agreement passed between them. They both understood loss. They were both searching for solace. "Maybe we both need to face our past, Jake," she said softly, her eyes entrancing and fierce. "You can't move forward if you're still tethered to all that pain." His instinct flared back. He didn't want to confront anything. He just wanted to survive this winter, his life measured in cold and solitude. But buried beneath that instinct, an undeniable desire to break free, to unearth a different future, began to surface. The irony hit him. Here he was, steeling himself against the warmth of another person. And what if facing it only brings more pain? "It might," she admitted, taking a step back, creating space that he realized he didn't truly want. "But I think it could also offer healing. Look at us. We're here, now, together. It's already a shift." A deep breath grounded him as he struggled with her words. Facing the past didn't mean he had to do it alone. It was terrifying, yet there was a tantalizing allure about that thought. The notion that perhaps connection could heal rather than hurt, could grant him strength rather than vulnerability. In that moment of silence, they exchanged glances, daring each other to take a step forward instead of retreat. He could see her own battle reflected in her steadfast expression. both tethered by the weight of their histories, yet standing at the precipice of something new. "Okay," he finally said, the word emerging as a quiet acceptance. "Let's face whatever's waiting out there. Together." A flicker of a smile broke over her face, a hint of a shared vulnerability that could transform into trust. But even as he committed to this path, the shadows of fear lingered just out of reach. Back inside the cabin, the warm glow of the fire held a promise that felt both inviting and intimidating. As they settled down, he caught a glimpse of his past lurking in the corners, the careers he abandoned, the relationships he neglected, the emotional burdens he carried like stones. He realized then that their connection might not just heal, it could force him to confront a side of himself he had long evaded. There, amid the cozy confines of the wooden walls, the threat of his previous isolation loomed large. And as the flames flickered, reflecting the turmoil within him, Jake pondered what revelations awaited on this journey. Could he truly discover the depths of himself he had buried so long ago? But as Mary began to share stories of her life, her challenges, her losses, Jake could only wonder if he was ready to fully engage, or if he was destined to hide in the shadows of unacknowledged fears. Would he have the courage to understand her pain, to embrace his own, or would the demons of his past once again ensnare him in their tightening grip? With those questions hanging in the air, he braced for the challenge ahead, one that would test not just his resolve to connect, but the very essence of who he was becoming. The journey had begun, but where would it lead? As the fire crackled, Jake leaned closer, allowing the warmth to seep into his bones while Mary recounted stories of her life. Her words flowed effortlessly, filled with raw emotion, yet the deeper meanings took root in Jake's mind like stubborn weeds. Each tale she shared felt like a mirror reflecting back the very things he had shunned: grief, love, and the inevitable march of time. "What was it like for you?" she asked suddenly, her voice softer, almost intimate. "When you lost them?" The question pierced through his defenses, and he felt a rush of anxiety wash over him. The ghosts of his past stirred, demanding to be acknowledged. He could scarcely find the words, his throat constricting at the thought of uttering their names. "It's hard to describe," he finally managed, "like walking through a fog that never lifts. You think it'll clear, but it just thickens."
The admission tasted bitter on his tongue, revealing the truth he had long buried. Mary nodded, an understanding flickering in her eyes, but she wasn't ready to let him slide back into silence. "Do you think people can ever truly recover from that kind of loss, or does it change you forever?" He thought for a moment, the weight of her question pressing down. Recovery felt like a distant dream, one he had long since deemed unreachable. "I think it changes you. You can't go back to who you were before, but maybe you can redefine who you are now." As soon as the words escaped, something shifted within him, like a hesitant crack in the armor he had so carefully constructed. Could he genuinely allow himself to reconsider what life could look like? A swell of emotion threatened to overcome him as realization set in. Perhaps the path Mary suggested was one he needed. The quiet of the cabin enveloped them, punctuated only by the popping of the fire and the soft sound of her breathing. Here, amid remnants of a life once familiar, he felt intensity building, merging with the desire to push against the boundaries of his past. But what if redefining yourself means confronting all the pain you've tried so hard to escape? He asked, the fear clawing back at him, unbidden. What if facing it just opens old wounds? Mary met his gaze, the depth of her understanding anchoring him in a way he hadn't anticipated. Maybe it will, but maybe it'll also help you stop running in circles. You can learn to carry that pain without letting it consume you. We don't always have control over what happens to us, Jake, but we do have control over how we respond. Her words resonated, a striking consciousness awakening within him. It was a revelation, not merely an acceptance of pain, but an acknowledgement of his own resilience. Slowly, something inside Jake began to cascade downward, the constriction around possibilities loosening even slightly. What if I fail? The questions tumbled out before he could silence them. Then you learn from it and try again, Mary proffered, her tone unwavering.
Failing doesn't mean you didn't grow. It just means you're human. With that, he felt the tiniest flicker of hope igniting in his chest. He thought about the various paths his life could take, the one encased in solitude, or the one that allowed him to embrace both his pain and the unpredictable joys of connection. A confusing tangle of emotions surged within him. He was on the brink of a choice that could alter the course of his being. The moment stretched, charged with possibility yet tinged with doubt. He realized he had a decision to make: continue engaging with the fear he always returned to, or take a chance on confronting the unknown risk of vulnerability. His internal debate raged on, propelled by the flickering shadows cast by the fire, his past looming as a daunting figure in the backdrop.
Jake opened his mouth to speak, the weight of his inner conflict wrapping around him like a shroud. But a sudden noise outside shattered his concentration, a wrestling that pulled him back to the present moment. Heart pounding, he exchanged a concerned glance with Mary. "Did you hear that?" he asked, tension crackling in the air. Mary nodded, her eyes widening. "What do you think it is?" An entirely different type of danger had intruded upon their fragile cocoon, and as Jake stood to investigate, the echoes of his turmoil lingered. Not only did he face the formidable weight of his past, but now he was confronted by an immediate threat that demanded his attention. The path had shifted once again, and as he moved toward the door, Jake felt the magnitude of his choices rising like a storm. Would he merely survive this confrontation, or would it become another opportunity for deeper self-discovery? The unknown awaited, and Jake braced himself for whatever lay beyond. Jake felt the chill of the night air wash over him as he cautiously approached the cabin door. The flickering light from the fire cast long shadows, underscoring the tension winding through him. With each step, he could almost visualize the path that had brought him here. 5 years spent in self-imposed isolation, layers of loss wrapped tightly around him, weakening his defenses. The rustling outside heightened his senses. Was it a wild animal or something more sinister? He opened the door, the creaking hinges a glaring reminder of the world he had chosen to ignore. Moonlight spilled into the cabin, and for a brief moment illuminated a space where he could have lived free of fear. Now it bore witness to his struggle. The cold air nipped at his skin, and he scanned the darkness, straining to hear the slightest hint of movement. "What if it's nothing?" he whispered to himself, the words a thin shield against encroaching anxiety. What if this was simply a test, a way to confront both his physical environment and the internal battles he had meticulously avoided? Just as he decided to step outside, the noise returned, a rustling followed by a low growl. His heart raced as he took a deep breath. The thought struck him: vulnerability didn't come solely from exposing his feelings. Perhaps it was also about facing real threats. Would he let the world intimidate him into submission, or would he confront what lay ahead, much like he contemplated confronting his emotional barriers? "Jake, be careful," Mary's voice broke through his thoughts, pulling him back momentarily. He glanced toward her, catching her worried expression. "I need to see what it is. It might be dangerous." He was surprised by the steadiness of his own voice, an expression of determination that felt foreign yet invigorating. He stepped out of the cabin, each cautious movement a testament to his resolution. The forest loomed, dark and thick. The moonlight barely pierced through the canopy above. Shadows danced, teasing his imagination. Each creak and crackle surrounding him seemed to fuel the dread, but Jake fought against the urge to retreat. Then, from the nearest tree line, he caught sight of a shape, lithe but unmistakably wild. He strained to see in the dim light, identifying the silhouette of a deer. Relief washed over him, and with it came a sudden realization. Nothing out there was threatening. The real danger was the fear he harbored in his heart. With the deer slowly wandering off, he returned to the cabin, closing the door behind him. A rush of energy surged through him, and he realized that even confronting a small fear had emboldened him. It suddenly became clear that life required risks, each step into uncertainty holding potential for growth. Mary was waiting, her expression morphing from concern to curiosity. "What did you find?" she asked, as if sensing the shift within him. "Just a deer," he replied, the weight of his words unexpectedly liberating. "But it made me think. I can't just keep hiding from everything, whether it's the forest or the feelings that gnaw at me." Mary's eyes sparkled with understanding. "It seems like a breakthrough, Jake.
It's one thing to talk about redefining who you are, but another to actually act upon it. He nodded slowly. I didn't realize until now that confronting external fears could help me tackle the internal ones. It's like I've had it all reversed. Suddenly, thoughts that had remained dormant surged to the surface. What if I leaned into this challenge? What if I used it to explore not just the woods, but also the parts of me I've shut away? Mary's smile widened, confirming that the light of possibility was beginning to illuminate paths he had thought closed off forever. Yet a nagging uncertainty still lingered. Could he truly embrace vulnerability, even in the face of real danger, or was there more to unravel? Determined, Jake took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the fire surround him. But the rush of exhilaration didn't quite replace the underlying shivering doubt. The pull between self-discovery and the fear of failure still gnawed at him, and he knew he was just beginning to scratch the surface. As they settled back into the glow of the fireplace, a palpable shift filled the air. Amid the comfort of their shared space, anxiety and eagerness blended into a distinct tension. What new understanding lurked on the horizon, and what challenges awaited? Jake's thoughts drifted toward the next daunting chapters of his journey, with the echoes of Mary's insights reverberating in the back of his mind. He had stepped closer to facing all of his fears, yet so many remained unmet and unexamined. But the night lingered, promising further revelations. Would courage ignite a fire of transformation, or would it simmer quietly under layers of his being, waiting for the next call to action? The struggle had only just begun. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, with sunlight filtering through the trees, casting intricate patterns on the cabin's worn floorboards. Jake stirred, feeling the weight of his newfound resolve pressing against him like a warm embrace. What lay ahead felt unclear, yet exhilarating, a possibility that echoed deeper truths about who he was. As he stepped out onto the porch, the world appeared different. The morning dew glistened like scattered jewels, and the forest's sounds felt vibrant, a symphony rather than a cacophony. The deer from last night lingered in his mind. That single encounter had been a pivotal moment, one that ushered in the realization that all creatures shared the same instinct: survival. Could he learn to navigate through not just the wilderness, but also through the thickets of his own emotions? Jake glanced over at Mary, who was balancing a steaming cup of coffee, her fingers wrapped around the warm ceramic. The sunlight danced in her hair, highlighting her focus as she prepared breakfast. How strange it was for her to be here, a variable in a life he had kept tightly controlled. "Ready for our adventure today?" she asked, a teasing smile tugging at her lips. "Adventure? I thought it would just be a hike." He feigned confusion, but the thrill coursing through him was genuine. This was his moment to explore, not just physically, but mentally as well. As they prepared to leave, Jake stood still for a moment, allowing the gravity of what was occurring to wash over him. He was stepping away from the confines of both the cabin and his emotional burdens. An insight struck him then. It wasn't merely about returning to the world, but about integrating the fragments of himself he had kept hidden. Within minutes, they set off along the trail, the underbrush crunching beneath their boots. Jake welcomed the sharp scents of pine and earth, finding clarity in the rhythmic sound of their movement. With each step, he chose to embrace the discomfort of vulnerability, aware that he would forge new connections, not just with Mary, but with himself. "Tell me something you've always wanted to do but never have," Mary said, her curiosity reigniting the conversation. Jake hesitated, feeling the familiar weight of uncertainty creeping back in. "I don't know," he admitted, discomfort curling in his stomach. "I guess I've just been afraid." "Afraid is normal," she responded gently. "But what would it look like if you weren't?" The question lingered, echoing in an empty room of possibility within his mind. What if he dared to embrace that question? In an instant, an image crystallized. He envisioned himself not as the hermit he had been, but as a man willing to share his life, his experiences, perhaps even his deeper fears. Each thought opened doors to opportunities long dismissed. They paused at a clearing where the trees parted, revealing a stunning view of the valley below. "Look at that," Mary said, her voice a soft melody woven with wonder. "It reminds me that there's so much beauty in the world if we choose to see it." Jake felt the swell of emotion rising in his chest, a profound recognition of how life existed outside his self-imposed limits. In that moment, he embraced the fact that vulnerability could lead to strength, and the beauty was in the risking of his heart. "Maybe I'll start writing again," he said, surprising even himself with the declaration. "There was a time when it was my escape, before..." Before everything went dark, she finished, meeting his gaze. Yeah, before I lost my way, he confessed, realizing how discussing it felt lighter out loud. The old Jake would have kept those thoughts buried, yet here was a new possibility emerging from that very darkness, one that spoke to the artist inside him. As they walked in silence, each step felt like reclaiming another part of himself, but with each moment of clarity, the shadows of doubt loomed larger nonetheless. Would he stay true to this newfound inspiration, or would the weight of past failures pull him back toward isolation? As they continued down the winding path, anticipation mixed with trepidation rolled within him. He found himself tearing at the edges of fear that held him captive. A little at a time, he sought to unearth not just what scared him, but also what awaited beyond the fear. But soon the trail began to steepen, and they approached a fork in the path. One route veered towards a rocky summit that seemed treacherous, while the other meandered gently into the forest. Where they headed would define more than just the physical landscape. It would reflect their resolve to confront their deepest fears. "Which direction do we take?" Mary asked, her eyes full of both intrigue and challenge. His heart raced as he opened his mouth to respond. Would he choose safety or embrace uncertainty? In that pause, a lingering thought invaded his mind. What if making the right choice today could lead him toward the transformation he'd only dared to imagine? Jake felt the tension coil tightly. Would he embrace the summit and confront the heights of his fears, or retreat into comfort, denying his potential? With each breath, he sensed this was not just a choice about the hike ahead, but a pivotal moment that could define who he would become. The moment hung between them, weighty with unspoken fears and uncharted possibilities. Jake could hear the whisper of the wind rustling through the leaves, almost mocking him as it coaxed him toward one direction over the other. He imagined the rocky summit, jagged edges, sharp inclines, an unwelcoming ascent that mirrored the peaks of insecurity he had climbed in his mind for years. On the other hand, the gentle forest invited him with its promise of serenity, a tempting retreat into the shadows of comfort. Taking a slow, steadying breath, Jake glanced at Mary. Her expression, a combination of expectation and encouragement, nudged him toward a decision.
He was aware of the power vested in small moments, how the act of choosing could shape the very essence of who he wanted to become. "I think we should go up," he finally said, the words almost foreign yet cathartic. The summit called to him, an echo of every fear he had ever harbored and every obstacle he had evaded. He felt the thrill of resistance within him, like the tension before a storm. "Really? You want to tackle the steep climb?" she asked, her tone teasing, but her eyes conveyed a deeper understanding. "Yes, I do. Besides, I need to learn to face what frightens me." He felt a flicker of confidence, igniting an unfamiliar fire in his chest. He would have to rise to meet each challenge. With a steady nod, they set off toward the rocky path. As they began to ascend, the trail became more arduous with every step. Jake's lungs burned, and fatigue tugged at his legs, but he pressed on. The incline seemed to mirror his internal struggle, a physical manifestation of what lay within. His doubts, memories from the past that threatened to drag him down into that dark abyss he had fought for years. Jake broke the silence, focusing on the climb, aware it was both a distraction and a confrontation. "Mary, do you ever feel like you have things from your past holding you back?" Her voice was measured as she carefully navigated the stones beneath her feet. "Every day, but it's about how we choose to deal with those things. Do you feel like bringing them up makes it easier?" He stumbled over a rock, nearly losing his footing, but caught himself before tumble. "For me, it's an exhausting thought." Mary paused, turning to face him. "It is exhausting, but what's more tiring is suppressing them. The longer you push it away, the heavier it becomes." Her words pierced through Jake's defenses. He realized he often barricaded his emotions to avoid the weight of confrontation, all the while neglecting the growth he could achieve through the process. It was both a revelation and a challenge, a call to arms to face his own ghosts. Continuing upward, their breaths mingled with the crisp mountain air, each shared exhale fueling the profound conversation. The rocks beneath them crunched, an unsettling reminder of the unpredictability of both nature and life. Every slip echoed a familiar theme of imperfection, those moments when he felt he had lost himself amidst the clutter of survival instincts. With one final push, they reached a small clearing at the summit.
The view before them unfurled like a masterpiece, an expanse of deep greens and rolling hills under the vast open sky. For a moment, Jake felt weightless, as if he had risen above all that once held him down. His heart raced with exhilaration and fear. Here he stood, not just on a physical peak, but on the precipice of personal evolution. "This is beautiful," he breathed, overwhelmed by the sheer magnificence before him. Mary's presence next to him grounded the moment. "You faced the fear, Jake."
This view is a reward for your courage. But even in this triumphant moment, doubts crept back in. Would he be able to internalize this victory, to let it carve a path for the story he wanted to tell? With each tantalizing breath of freedom came a shadow, the nagging question, what if he faltered again? Jake turned to Mary, energy crackling in the air between them. What if there's something I don't understand about myself? Something that might hold me back from really moving forward? Her gaze remained steady, unwavering amid the waves of his internal struggle. Then we explore it together. Climbing this mountain is just the beginning. As they shared this serene moment, a new doubt tainted the air. Could he truly open up and explore those darker facets of himself? But before he could delve deeper into this uncertainty, a faint rustle behind them shattered the stillness. Their shared glance conveyed a spark of curiosity mixed with apprehension. As they turned to investigate the source of the sound, Jake's pulse quickened. What awaited them in the shadows of the trees below? The moment of truth was approaching once again, just as the winds carried with them the promise of more unexpected challenges. Would Jake and Mary confront whatever lurked just past the tree line, or would they retreat into the comfort of their fears? The air was thick with a mix of anticipation and dread as Jake glanced back at the tree line. The rustling continued, punctuating the serenity of the summit with uncertainty. For a moment, he wondered if facing the unknown required more than just a physical climb. Did it also necessitate emotional bravery? "Do you think it's another hiker?" he asked, attempting to mask his nervousness. Mary shrugged, her brow furrowing with concentration. "I don't know, but we need to find out," she replied, her tone a blend of determination and caution. The resolve in her eyes stoked a fire within him, forcing him to confront the fact that hiding would no longer be an option. The true essence of this climb was about more than nature. It was about facing the undisclosed parts of himself. With a deep breath, he stepped toward the edge of the clearing, which served as a precarious border between the thrill of discovery and the safety of avoidance. As the noise grew nearer, he caught a glimpse of movement in the underbrush. Heart pounding, Jake felt his palms sweat. It wasn't just about the rustling sound. It was about what it symbolized, the very core of his internal struggle. What if he ventured further and discovered something that would challenge who he was? But the fiery surge of determination reminded him of the summit's view, the feeling of triumph that had enveloped him moments before. Behind the veil of fear lay an opportunity for growth. "Let's go together," Mary interjected, her voice breaking through his fracturing thoughts. She reached for his hand, an anchor amidst the turbulence. Their fingers interlaced, and he felt an immediate sense of grounding. Together, they took cautious steps toward the source of the sound, the connection between them becoming a lifeline he desperately needed. The branches parted, revealing a small clearing surrounded by towering trees. In the middle stood a figure, hunched and discreet, almost as if trying to merge with the ground. It was a woman, disheveled and tense, her eyes darting nervously as if she were also weighing her options. Jake's instincts kicked in. "Are you okay?" he called out, the tremor in his voice betraying the steadiness he intended to convey. As the woman turned, Jake felt an instant familiarity in her expression, an echo of his own vulnerability reflected back at him. Her eyes met his, filled with a fear similar to his own, yet behind it lay something else, a flicker of something he couldn't quite place. "I didn't mean to intrude," she stammered, backing up slightly as if to create a barrier. "I was just passing through." The air grew taut with tension as Jake felt the weight of unspoken fears thickening between them. It was more than a mere encounter. It became a confrontation, not just of the woman before him, but of the insecurities he had battled for years. "What brings you up here?" Mary inquired softly, her voice a gentle nudge forward. Jake's heart raced as he watched the woman, her demeanor softening marginally under Mary's kindness, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling that some part of her was still closed off, much like he often was. "I needed to escape," the woman admitted, her gaze drifting downward. "From everything." Jake reflected on that single word, escape. It hit too close to home. He had spent years retreating from his past,
allowing anxiety to dictate his life choices. The very act of reaching the summit had stirred something within him. This act of confronting the mountain was actually akin to unearthing buried emotions. "Do you think escaping is the answer?" he found himself asking, compelled by a mix of empathy and a desire for understanding. The moment hung heavily, waiting for her response. Yet it was more than a question for her. It was a challenge for him, forcing him to examine if he had simply been running from himself as well. The woman hesitated, her brow furrowing in contemplation. Before she could answer, a sudden rush of wind swept through the trees, a visceral reminder of nature's unpredictability, as if life itself was urging them to unveil their truths. Will Jake and Mary help her confront the pain they all seem to carry, or will this encounter simply push them back into their shells, running from the reality they need to face? The uncharted depths of the unknown were still ahead, and they all stood at the threshold. The silence lingered, heavy with unshared fears and unlit truths. Jake felt the weight of the woman's hesitation pressing down on him, making the air almost unbreathable.
Each moment felt like an eternity, the anticipation sprouting doubts within him. He had initiated a conversation that opened a door, but would they step in or linger outside? As he shifted nervously, Jake considered the other figure standing beside him, Mary. Her unwavering presence served as a reminder of the support he often sought but rarely received. She was the antithesis of his self-imposed exile, the light that illuminated the shadowy corners of his past. Her hand in his steadied him. "Escaping is complicated," Jake said, channeling his own confusion. "I think sometimes we need to face what's haunting us instead of running." The words held a weight that transcended his intent. They mirrored his own struggles, echoing the doubts he had wrestled with in solitude. The woman blinked, as if his words were jolting her from a dream. What if facing it means falling apart? Her voice trembled, revealing layers of unseen pain. What if I can't handle it? Jake's heart sank. He understood that terror intimately. It wrapped around him like an old friend. "You're stronger than you think," he offered, feeling a flicker of conviction amidst his own uncertainty. He was on this mountain not only for himself, but also for these uncharted connections, for the chance to confront potential companionship forged in shared vulnerability. "Strength comes from struggle," Mary added, her voice infused with quiet authority. "We are all facing our own mountains, and it's okay to admit that we're scared." He watched the interplay between Mary and the woman, two individuals grappling with the past and present. Suddenly, Jake felt an overwhelming urge to connect deeper, to confront the realities surrounding them. "Can I share something?" he asked, aware that this could either fortify or fracture the fragile moment. The woman nodded, her expression shifting from defensiveness to curiosity. Jake drew a breath, the crisp mountain air filling his lungs as if it could grant him courage. "I spent years trying to escape. I shut out everything that reminded me of my fears and failures. I thought if I didn't face them, they wouldn't exist, but that only made the darkness grow." As he spoke, he felt his own emotions rise, ghosting through his voice. The release of pain and regret was cathartic. This climb was as much about conquering the mountain as it was about facing myself. That realization, he hesitated, uplifting his gaze to meet hers. It has opened the doors I had locked tight. The woman's eyes softened, the flickering tension dimming. "I've spent so long running, I don't know how to stop." The vulnerability in her admission resonated in the very marrow of Jake's bones. A crack in the protective armor she wore was beginning to show, and with it a small web of hope stretched within him. Could this extraordinary moment mark the point at which they all began to mend, to forge genuine connections? "Maybe we can help each other," he proposed cautiously, the notion of collaboration blossoming in his mind. "We don't have to do this alone." His words breathed life into an idea still tentative in his heart. Mary interjected gently, "All three of us have carried burdens. What if we face them together, starting now?" The challenge resonated, an invitation to delve deeper into uncharted emotional territory. "Will you join us?" Jake asked, extending an invitation that meant risking rejection, but also potential healing. Just as an answer seemed to be forming on the woman's lips, the shadows in the trees shifted again. An unsettling rustle echoed through the clearing, shattering the fragile moment they had just woven. The unexpected disturbance heralded an approaching threat. What loomed beyond the trees? Would they find a new path leading to self-discovery, or would old fears manifest in ways they had never anticipated? As adrenaline surged through him, Jake understood he was at another precipice, one that demanded not just bravery, but perhaps a reinvention of who he believed himself to be. The summit of confrontation awaited, and the winds of fate were shifting. Jake stood frozen at the precipice of uncertainty as the ominous rustling in the trees intensified. It was a defining moment, a crucible designed to test the very essence of his growth over the past few days. He had fought fiercely against solitude, confronting his fears and starting to form connections. But now he was faced with an immediate challenge, the echoes of unresolved anxiety thrumming in tandem with the pulsing nature surrounding him. Mary gripped his hand tighter, grounding him as panic threatened to sway his determination. As he felt their fingers interlocked, the warmth sparked a memory, the realization that he was no longer alone. This was no longer a solitary climb, it was a collective journey. The figure in the shadows drew closer, and as sunlight punctured the canopy, illuminating the scene, Jake saw not a beast or threat, but a small, lost creature, a deer separated from its herd. Relief surged through him, displacing the tension. The animal paused, eyes wide, mirroring the vulnerability that clung to each of them. While the deer had strayed, its presence was a reminder of innocence overshadowed by fear, a profound metaphor for their emotional battles. Jake's heart raced as he realized that this moment was not just about the deer, but about each of them. Encounters like this often held the power to catalyze profound change. Would they retreat from the unexpected, or could they unite in the face of it? "Look, it's just a deer," Jake said, taking a slow step forward as the creature stood resolutely at the edge of the clearing. He could feel Mary's unwavering presence beside him. Sometimes what seems threatening turns out to be harmless, just like our fears.
Those words resonated with him. The realization that this moment encapsulated everything he had been grappling with. The deer, a symbol of fear and beauty, called on them to reassess their own trepidations. The woman who had arrived with trepidation shifted closer, past the trees, her posture easing. "It's beautiful," she whispered, finally allowing the tranquility of the moment to seep in. The deer, emboldened, took a cautious step forward before bounding away into the underbrush, an illustration of the courage required to embrace vulnerability and move through deeper terrains. In that shared silence, Jake's voice broke through like the sun after dark. "We all carry burdens, we carry our pasts, but maybe that's what it means to be alive, to embrace the unknown, to take steps toward connection, even when uncertainties lurk." He found himself standing taller, no longer weighed down by his past, but invigorated by the collective experience they now shared. Mary turned to him, her eyes gleaming with encouragement and understanding. "You've awakened to a powerful truth, Jake. Healing is not linear. Just as we climb mountains, we will face the valleys of our struggles too, but courage thrives in vulnerability." Jake nodded, a newfound clarity igniting his spirit. "We can navigate this, together." It was a powerful declaration, one rooted in authentic connection and recognition of shared experience. He turned back to the woman, the understanding echoing in the space between them. "Would you give us the chance to help? Let's confront what haunts us side by side. We may discover more than we expect." The woman hesitated, but then he saw her nod slightly, a flicker of determination igniting behind her guarded expression. "I'd like that," she replied quietly, each word imbued with cautious hope. "I think I'd like to try." Jake felt a sense of triumph wash over him. This was not merely a personal journey, but the beginning of a shared healing experience. They stood together, companions on this transformative rise, weaving in and out of the complexities of life. Each was learning to redefine their understanding of strength, soul-bearing in the face of adversity, rather than retreating into darkness. As they began their descent from the summit, the path ahead held promise. It unfolded like a tapestry of relations, shredding the tendrils of loneliness that had ensnared each of them. Jake reflected on how climbing that mountain had been electrifying, a transformative act that symbolized breaking beyond the confines of what's comfortable. In the harmonizing ambiance of their connection,
He recognized that individual healing had become a collective journey. The mountains ahead would be steep, but armed with courage and the bonds they had forged, Jake felt unwavering confidence surging through him. Returning to the cabin, the warmth felt richer, the space lighter.
The flickering flame of the fire beckoned to them, an invitation to share stories and unveil even deeper layers of their pasts. Together, they began to peel back the layers of pain, celebrating each disclosure as a step towards liberation. As the night progressed, laughter intermingled with acknowledgement of grief. Each exchange fortified their resolve. Jake understood now that he had embarked on a profound transformation. Solitude was no longer his fortress. Connection had become his power. With each story shared and each fear confronted, Jake could feel the remnants of his isolation dissolving, replaced by the fortitude that arose from emotional interdependence. He had achieved not only survival, but the courage to muster his whole self, heart and soul, deeply relishing the embrace of companionship. Reflecting on the winding path, Jake felt an immense sense of achievement. He had conquered not just the mountain, but his hardest battles, discovering the authentic value of vulnerability and how it could lead to authentic triumph, healing, and growth. His heart radiated with an undeniable knowledge. True strength lay in connection, and through that union, every challenge could transform into an opportunity. Determined to maintain this momentum, Jake offered one last warm smile to Mary and the woman. To new beginnings, let's take this journey together. As the fire crackled warmly in the background, a sense of acceptance permeated the air. They were ready to face whatever lay ahead, forging unbreakable bonds one step at a time, ready to embrace what would come next on their journey toward healing. This is the moment Jake truly found himself, not lost in the echoes of the past, but present in a future filled with endless possibilities. The shadows of sorrow had receded, revealing an empowering truth about resilience, connection, and the breathtaking beauty of embracing life. As they settled in for a night of stories, hope radiated now in the space they occupied, and it was there, in the course of companionship, that true transformation had occurred. Now, it's your turn. If you resonated with Jake's journey and witnessed this incredible transformation, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel. Don't wait even one more second. Leave a like now to bolster our community where personal growth thrives, and share your reactions on Jake's monumental journey in the comments below. Your thoughts matter. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need closure and inspiration in their lives. Let's support each other and keep the momentum flowing. This is the moment to show your support.